So we were looking at, in particular, the digitally connected, disconnected community, I should say. And obviously, we're aware that this is an online webinar. So when we're talking about the voice and lived experience of the issue at hand, we're talking about people in communities that might not have had the confidence, the data, the technology, or anything to participate. So we were quite mindful of that in that respect. So the first question we asked is just, we looked at over the last 24 to 48 hours, how much we relied on technology, data, access to the Wi-Fi. I'm not very good at technical words, so I might get these a bit wrong, you know. But in a nutshell, we had people now working from home. We had claimants trying to access their online journal to stick to their claimant commitment. We had fears of being sanctioned because they couldn't look for jobs online on Indeed, because they couldn't get to the library to get their hours slot there. We had, I think I said that, children homeschooling. We rely now on online shopping. We have Uber Eats maybe on an app if we're lucky enough to have an app. We've got families that live all across the country or the world. So WhatsApp, for those who are lucky enough to be able to use it or have it, have been able to stay connected to some extent. But if you haven't had that, that's been really difficult. We've had an inability to access services. And so particularly our most vulnerable groups or people that we support have not had that ability to stay connected or get the support they wanted. Now that's it in a nutshell. There were lots and lots and lots of other examples given. So then we explored the question around whose responsibility is it to keep people connected? Is it an individual responsibility? And we incur the costs, and we incur that take the decision to then become confident and able and skilled to be able to use this effectively and not feel scared that our data is going to be sent off to the ether and everybody's going to have our phone number. So we did look at that, and we looked at, does everybody want to be connected? But I think some of the debate coming back at, does everybody want to be connected, was questioned, as in, we may not want to be connected, but modern day society is expecting us to be, whether it's accessing a GP surgery, whether it's a referral to a hospital, whether it is our online universal credit account. So we needed to explore those issues. We didn't just think about whose responsibility in terms of the individual. We looked at, is it the government's responsibility? Being connected and online is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Like I said, in modern day society, it's things that we have to do to enable us to participate in modern day life. So we looked at the government. We also had I threw into the pot a bit about if the DWP are expecting people to go on an online journal, do they have some responsibility? That's the mode or the mechanism by which they can adhere to their claim and commitment. We looked at housing. We looked at like a water board. If you're unemployed, you may not pay your full water rates, but you'll pay the sewerage. So is there an argument for a basic free Wi-Fi? We looked at the providers, and the profits that they make. Can that be then, put back into the community, some of the profits in order to, particularly in built-up areas or low-income community areas where there's a basic free Wi-Fi connection. So the connection is one aspect, the skills and the expertise and the competence is another aspect to look at. And to address these issues, it's about working with people who are digitally divided so that the solutions that are offered or the debate informs effective solutions that will work long term. We also talked about a little bit about, after this session today, if we're working in a community, how are we going to make sure that we feed back to our community? How are we going to make sure that their voices are heard and inform the debate going forward? So that's it in a nutshell. I probably missed somebody's key comment out, and I do apologise for that, but it was an interesting session, and thanks to those who participated.
Good stuff. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, Dan, OperationWifi, five or so minutes. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Astrid. I'll keep it brief, don't worry. Thank you to everyone who came to one of the OperationWifi sessions. mainly I did a very short presentation about OperationWifi, where it started, and our key asks around setting up a national databank, allowing people to donate unused or excess mobile data for those who need it most, as part of that wider picture of the digital divide. Then the questions and discussion in the first session primarily focused on skills, those not involved with organisations in our communities. I don't like using that cliche of hard to reach, but probably to kind of get the message across, that was kind of where it focused. And so the discussion kind of led more to that idea of it being a wider picture. You know, the databank suggested by OperationWifi is just one part of a much wider picture in terms of addressing the digital divide and supporting people with those devices, skills and data that they need to be digitally included nowadays. And then the second session instead focused more on the practicalities of the databank idea itself, and the fact it's been tried successfully in Australia through Optus. There were positive comments about the databank idea and being able to share data, but kind of making sure that it is practical, and how it would work very similarly to the family data packages that we see nowadays from our own UK telecoms companies. And that's pretty much it, to be honest. I'll keep it nice and brief, but thank you again to everyone who came. Really useful. I'll put some more information in the chat box if you'd like to see more or to sign up. That would be really good. And our email address if you want to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, we could, Rosa, if that's okay. Rosa from the Frame Collective. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, similarly, thanks to everyone who came along to the session and gave really useful comments and feedback. I think it was a really good session focused around data poverty. And so we were talking about data poverty with the definition, the individuals, households or communities that can't afford sufficient private and secure mobile or broadband data to meet their essential needs. And what came up in our discussions was around the usefulness of actually having a definition, but then also the kind of intersectionality or overlap with other poverty issues. And, you know, an understanding that it's really nuanced, that, you know, people who are struggling to afford any of their basic needs are very likely to be experiencing data poverty as well, because those needs are just kind of moved round and round, and you have to prioritize what's most important. I think we heard about how different communities in Rochdale and Stockton were doing various things to try and get people online. So in Rochdale, they've been raising money to get their communities online, and it really created a lot of momentum around the issue. And now the local authority has actually started employing a coordinator as well. And in Stockton, we were talking about the problems of lack of Wi-Fi in shared accommodations. So in that particular example, it was particularly around problems refugees are facing. So they're in accommodation where there is no Wi-Fi kind of plumbed in, so to speak, and just don't have any access. And this is something that we came across in our previous research as well. So we talked about whether Wi-Fi will be considered an essential service at some point, like a utility. And, you know, that feels like something that's really important. People are, you know, seeing that Wi-Fi is an essential need for daily life. But then we were also talking about how many people rely on public Wi-Fi for access. And actually, as we move out of the pandemic, what are the plans to make public Wi-Fi secure and safe for people to use? Because there are issues around, you know, if you're using your personal data, if that's your only source, particularly of getting online, and you have to make transactions around your health, sharing private data about your health or financial stuff, you know, public Wi-Fi does need to be adequately secure. So they were broadly the issues we talked about, and it was a really useful discussion. So thanks to everyone. I'm keeping it really brief and kind of just whizzing through, but yeah, just to say thank you to everyone who came along, and if anyone wants to get in touch or find out more about the work, I'll put the link in the website in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Rosa. That was brilliant. Yeah, Darren, Hartlepool Action Lab, we've got loads of time, so over to you.
Thanks, Astrid. Yeah, I'll try and fill as much as I can. Yeah, so we spoke about how Hartlepool Action Lab, we've worked to formulate a more local solution to the issues around digital exclusion. And by being members of the Apple Collective, we were able to see that the issues that were being faced on a local level were also part of the national rhetoric as well, which was all around digital exclusion at the beginning of lockdown. And we, within the Action Lab, what we do is we try to find, we work together with organisations and services in our town to develop solutions out of poverty for people. So we're very linked to poverty and solving poverty. And what we started to do is get as many people together as we could who had a part to play in tackling this issue. And once we had that group together, we started looking at the barriers that people were facing around accessing digital. So we spoke about how getting the kit into people's hands was an issue. We found solutions. We talked about if the people then had the skills and the confidence to use that kit, and we spoke about the connectivity issue and the data poverty that was around. And data was a really, really difficult thing to be able to access. And our local partner found a very practical solution to that, in that they became Ofcom registered and now a broadband provider based in Hartlepool. And the broadband that they provided it's a no contract pay as you go broadband. So you can pay, it's £20 per month, but you can pay that on a weekly basis of £5 a week as well. And one of the questions was, is this something that we're seeing happening on a wider scale? And the holistic approach that we've tried to take, we haven't seen as of yet. But obviously there is sort of all sorts of solutions coming across to tackle each issue individually. We've tried to sort of encompass all that into one project, which is working for ourselves locally. But the broadband provider itself, we can provide broadband with Get Connected anywhere in the UK with the same contract, because it's literally just, you get your router, you plug it into a plug-in in your home, and it starts to broadcast 4G Wi-Fi throughout your house. You don't need anyone to come and drill any holes in your home or anything like that. And then we started looking at the motivations that people might have for accessing the internet. And that was something that we found very difficult to A, measure, and B, sort of be able to find solutions to, in that, how do we sell the idea of the internet to people who just aren't interested, who have never been interested, even though it was becoming such an all-encompassing issue. So we tried to break it down into 4 key areas, which was connecting to learn and accessing learning resources. We can connect to be more social and access social media or things like this, and being able to video chat with family. We can connect to be better off, and we can access, online banking. We can see what money's coming in and out. We can access the online comparison sites to be able to get all of our household bills down. And then finally, we can connect to access support. So a lot of mental health support became online or over the phone, and just being digitally connected give us more avenues. And one of the questions was, with regards to motivation, did we find that older people were the ones who were less motivated to become digitally connected? And we didn't. There was no sort of correlation between the groups that we found. But what we did find is, obviously, because we work within low-income communities, we found that a lot of people within those communities had the support networks that they needed, and had basically they live within their own bubbles anyway, because they don't have the finances to be able to branch out. And often in low-income communities, we find that it becomes very territorial. And if there's a community centre over the road, then that's over the road's community centre. It's not for us. So yeah, we didn't find any sort of direct correlation between age or anything for people not being digitally connected. So we just try to cover all the bases with what we were trying to do. And we've got local partners so that we can provide a text service for Get Connected. For anyone who is a British Sign Language user, they can get support through customer services that way. We've got a vision support organisation who's been working with us, so that if anyone's got any visual issues, then we know we can sort of lean on that organisation for support. We've got an organisation who support wheelchair users and people with disabilities in the town, who is also part of the project. So we've tried to, if we're talking about inclusivity, then accessibility has to be a conversation that's part of that, and that's where we've tried to make sure that our service is completely accessible. And as a holistic service, it's not something that we've seen happen on a more national scale, but yeah, that was our group.
Thanks, Darren. That was great. Yeah, loads of interesting information. I think that's everyone fed back from the group now. So thanks for all that. Some really, really good stuff there. Lots of insights and food for thought and solutions and action as well. So I think is it back over to you, Darren, for the next bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll try and pick them up. So the next part that we're going to look at is we've got 3 panelists who are with us at the moment, and the reason that we're going to be talking about this is, at Apple we really we work and we maintain our networks between ourselves to amplify the voice of lived experience, and to use that to use our energy to be able to work with people with influence, to be able to find lasting solutions for real people, and without an audience, we're kind of shouting into a void. And what we need is people who are willing to work with us and see the value of lived experience. And the 3 people that we've got on our panel today, the people who we've all worked with, they've supported us to access all party parliamentary groups. They've supported us to access, guest speakers at webinars, and just to put a real value on the lived experience and the voice of lived experience. So I'll briefly introduce you. We've got Abby Meadows from Turn to Us. We've got Ellie Pope, who's here from the local trust, and we've got Emma Stone from Good Things Foundation. And just before I pass over to each individually, I'll introduce you one at a time. But just before, if anyone's got any questions that they want to pose to the panel, if you want to just put them in the chat, and if we get a chance at the end, we'll ask them live through the webinar. If not, we'll make sure that the questions are sent over to each of our panelists. And once we've got a response, we'll send the responses out to each individual who asks a question. So, having said that, if I can start with Abby from Turn to Us, if you can just let us know sort of the work that you do and the work and how you've been able to work with Apple and that kind of thing.
Definitely. Thanks, Darren. So I think, Katie, if you could share my slides just for the first few minutes, that would be really great. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Abby and I'm the co-production officer at Turn to Us. Thanks for having me on the panel. I'm really, really excited to be here. I've admired the work of Apple for like a year now, since I came into the role at Turn to Us. So what I'm going to do, I'll spend the first half introducing what Turn to Us does, our approach to amplifying lived experience voices generally, and then the latter half looking at that specific example of the APPG. For those who don't know, that's the all-party parliamentary group. Can everyone see my slides? Okay, yeah, so next slide, please, Katie. So Turn to Us is a national anti-poverty charity. We give out grants, we have a helpline, we provide information through our digital tools, such as our benefits calculator and our grant search tool. And the numbers on the slide demonstrate our impact with these services from the last year. And then below that, you can see our purpose. So it's so people can build financial sustainability and thrive. Turn to Us gives people the information and support they need in the face of life-changing events, and then collaborates to tackle the causes and symptoms of poverty. So we try to do this in an equitable way, and that is an ongoing journey for us, recognising that whilst we're all weathering the same storm, we of course are not all in the same boats. An example of this is that we recently launched a new grants fund that is specifically for women from Bangladeshi and Black African communities. And we're delivering that fund in partnership with grassroots organisations in a participatory grant-making model. And we're doing this because multiple research shows that Black and minority ethnic groups are more likely than white groups to have experienced negative financial impacts during COVID and lockdown. Next slide, please, Katie. Great. So how do we do it? So we use co-production and involvement as a way of working at Turn to Us. What that means is that we're committed to involving people with a lived experience of financial hardship in the design of our work. And the purpose of this, which is on the slide, has 2 main aspects: to learn from one another and to combine the power of lived expertise with the power of professional expertise. And we believe that that combination and that knowledge learned puts us all in a stronger position to meaningfully tackle the symptoms of poverty. So over the past year, we've involved about 130 people with lived experience in around 30 co-production and involvement projects, and we pay everyone London Living Wage to do that. These projects have ranged from people giving feedbacks in workshops up to people holding decision-making power and influence over long-term projects. And the image on the slide is an example of that much more decision-making power sharing projects. So a team of 6 of us, 3 what we call co-production partners and staff, worked together very closely for 7 months to create our co-production framework, which that YouTube video looks at in a lot more detail. So if you are interested, I'd encourage you to just pop that into YouTube and have a look at it. You can stop sharing the slides now, Katie, thank you. So the question of how might we amplify the voices of lived experience to address the digital divide? So to answer this question, I'm going to look specifically at the APPG on universal credit. So what that is, for those who don't know, it's basically like an informal cross-party group that's made up of MPs and lords from all different political parties, and they just get together to talk about a particular issue. I mean, there's literally like APPGs for like different countries. There's one for like a board game, the card game Bridge. We are the secretariat for the one on universal credit. So what that means is that, so actually my wonderful colleague Tom Cave does this. I think a few people at Apple know him. He is a secretariat, and that means that we, with input from MPs and lords, write the agenda for the APPGs and source guests to come and present evidence at the APPG meetings. So this is a substantial amount of power, and it's important that we share this power with lived experience voices and discuss our power in spaces like this, because it makes us accountable to sharing it. So the APPG meets roughly like 8 to 10 times a year, and it discusses different aspects of universal credit. So each session is themed. For the past year, we've invited people with lived experience to come and give evidence to all but one of the meetings, which I'm proud to say that. And they have been from, you know, different organisations, the Poverty Charities Ed UK, Refuge, Latin American Women's Rights Service, and then last July we had Tracy and Darren from Apple come to a session looking at UC and housing. So reflecting on the impact of this, Tom tells me it was a really rich experience, and the lords who attended that session went on to use the information that they gained in that session in their own Lord session that was upcoming on uprating in UC. Similarly, Deborah Abrahams, who is the chair of that APPG, but she's also on the DWP Select Committee, has recycled information from that session again and again. So, you know, we already know the impacts of APPGs, of lived experience in this policy setting, but that is just a bit of an anecdote to explain how it's worked as well. Am I all right for time? We've got a few, yeah?
Yeah, we're a bit ahead of our schedule anyway, so yeah, you've got minutes.
Brilliant. Just a few more points then. Thanks, Darren. And yeah, so we believe that inviting people with lived experience to speak at APPG sessions is a meaningful way of combining our power, and it's something that we're committed to, and we have demonstrated that through doing it for the past year. And we think it's a worthy way of us being allies to lived experience led organisations like Apple. And yeah, we're keen to have you back at another APPG session. We know that and we're both excited about the digital divide paper. And yeah, when practically, it's about when there's a UC APPG session that works with that theme of digital divide. The upcoming ones we have are on like UC and care, and then there's one on universal basic income. So it's not something that's scheduled, but it's definitely something that we are committed to. It's just a case of when it's coming up on the schedule. And yeah, we really value you accepting us as allies and hope that the relationship can continue to grow and not even just be contained to the APPG activity. I've never said APPG so much in such a short amount of time. I feel like it's all I've said for the last 7 minutes. So yeah, I appreciate we've run out of time now, but for me, it would be interesting to explore perhaps in the questions, like the challenges of this space and also what the gold standard would look like for amplifying lived experience voices. Because yeah, I have some thoughts on where we're at now and where we would really like to be. Similarly, I'm keen to continue this conversation on with anyone who's interested. Kate, you can share my email address. I'm always keen to connect with lived experience-led organisations who turn to us to partner with individuals with lived experience to come and work with us in our internal work at Turn to Us, and then other professional-led organisations to learn from. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. And yeah, that's brilliant. And obviously myself and Tracy were able to attend that APPG, and it was valuable. And you could tell that because sometimes there's listening and there's hearing, and we need to make sure that people actually hear what it is that we're saying, and the value was there. So definitely we would relish the opportunity to attend more of those APPGs. Thank you. We've already got a question through, which we'll move towards at the end. Next up, we've got Ellie Pope from Local Trust. Ellie, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Everyone, I'm Ellie. I'm Partnerships Intern at Local Trust. Local Trust was established in 2012 in order to deliver the Big Local programme. It was funded by the Big Lottery Community Fund, and essentially 150 communities across England were given just over £1 million and 15 years for residents to decide how to spend that money. Local Trust's role is to support our communities on whatever issues are important to them. And unsurprisingly, digital inclusion has, over the past year, become one of them. So this support that we provide to the communities has it started from trying to get our members online. Lots of them didn't have devices or data, had never used Zoom before. So a lot of that initial focus was on getting them meeting online to continue their really valuable work. And as they kind of gained capacity and confidence, they wanted to start helping others in their community. They realised what an important issue it was, and how little access people who are disconnected can get to just essential day-to-day services, information. They realised how interconnected it was with so many other different issues. So part of my role as Partnerships Intern over the past 6 months has been focusing on supporting people around digital inclusion. So putting on workshops, collating case studies, just getting people who are actually trying to tackle some of these issues to talk to each other, to share ideas. Also finding support partners for our communities like Good Things Foundation to try and support them on digital inclusion projects. I think a massive kind of realisation through this work was particularly on the issue of data poverty, how complicated it is to find an affordable and sustainable connection to the internet. It's just beyond a lot of individuals' reach, and without support from business and government, it's really, really hard to properly tackle. So part of the work of our partnerships, research and policy team is kind of influencing people with power. And part of this work that we've recently done around digital inclusion is commission the research that Rosa's leading on into community responses to data poverty. And we hope by this to kind of share great examples and great examples of work already being done by communities to address data poverty in order to kind of give a resource, inspire others, but also really acknowledge those gaps and what communities can't do without support from government and business. And so this leads into our work as a secretariat of the APPG on Left Behind Neighbourhoods. So Left Behind Neighbourhood, let me define it properly. so-called left behind neighbourhood, is defined by a combination of social and economic deprivation, low levels of community engagement, a lack of community spaces and places, and possibly most importantly for this, poor connectivity, both digital and physical. So a recent session we had on the APPG was on connectivity in January. And whenever we have a session, we always try and have lived experience from our communities, people with lived experience from our communities, to come and talk directly to the MPs and tell them what's important to them and what issues they wish they were focusing on. So out of that session in January, we've already had a report on physical connectivity, and the one in digital connectivity we're hoping that Rosa's research will feed into, to try and like celebrate the work that communities and individuals are already doing, but also really try and influence people empowered to show what an important issue it is and that they need to take action as well. We're hoping to continue collaborating with the Good Things Foundation on their data poverty research lab as well, and try and feed in as many experiences from our communities and other communities into that research and into that work. And also, final point, is that this research has been commissioned on behalf of the OperationWifi Alliance, that many of you would have heard Dan give a presentation on. So we really hope to amplify their asks as well through this work. Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. That's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. And then again, if anybody has any questions regarding what Ellie said, just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them towards the end. If I could just finally, last but not least, Emma from the Good Things Foundation, Emma Stone, if you'd like to take the floor.
Yes. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, everyone. So I'm Emma. I'm from Good Things Foundation, and I lead our design research and comms teams at Good Things. I'll just say a little bit about Good Things first, for people who haven't heard about us. So the whole point about fixing the digital divide, trying to close that, talking about digital inclusion, digital exclusion, that's been something that we've been doing for many, many years. So as a digital inclusion charity, until kind of last year, I'm kind of going to divide it into before the pandemic and then stuff that we've been doing since the pandemic. So before the pandemic, in the main, our focus has been around how do we make sure that a really wide range of local community organisations can respond to their local communities where people in those communities are wanting to get support to go online or to develop their skills, their confidence, so they can use the internet safely. And so probably the most important thing that we do is we support a network called the Online Centres Network, and they're all independent, you know, there's social enterprises, KIC, so Hartlepool, Action Lab, libraries, a real mix. And we provide free online learning resources as well to enable them to support people. And I always kind of start with that because I think that's one of the things that's really important here. We're a digital inclusion charity, but we're not going digital is the solution and the end goal for absolutely everyone. This is around people, and it's also about how digital works in and with people in their communities and where they are as well. So one of the other things we do is we collaborate, we work in partnership with a range of different organisations, and that includes kind of, you know, charities and charitable trusts, but also government and also business. And often that is around kind of different programmes to try and explore how we can widen kind of digital inclusion in different areas of people's lives. So the outcomes we talk about are how can we enable people to be happier and healthier and better off through using digital. And just to say that our focus obviously is around digital inclusion, and it's about going, do you know what? We've talked a lot about people who don't want to be connected, for example, and want to have that choice. And we're not kind of arguing against that choice. But we are saying we do know that for some people, they don't want to get connected because of actually a lot of different reasons. And a lot of that might be around fear. It might be around not having had the support. It might be around worrying that you're going to make a mistake or look stupid or all those sorts of things. So I think it's always really important that we look below when people are going, I don't want to do this, just to understand about if there are other barriers that that could be removed. So that's a lot about what we were doing. And then when the pandemic started, obviously a whole load of those community organisations, those community centres and libraries, they had to close their doors. And for us, that really exposed the issue around data poverty, around people not having home access to devices, to Wi-Fi, not being able to afford enough mobile coverage. And it isn't to say that that wasn't always an issue, but it just meant that there weren't those workarounds that were available for some people to be able to use. And I think the other thing that's happened through the pandemic is that actually the whole pace of things going online has really increased, whether that's shopping or banking or GP appointments or schooling, all of that has increased. And I think that's important to say, because it means that the issue around data poverty is not going to go away even after the pandemic, and even once those libraries and community centres, etc., are able to fully open again. There is still going to be more need for people to have home access and be able to afford to connect. And so that's why over the last year, we've kind of been doing things that we hadn't done before, kind of about trying to raise funds to distribute devices with data through community organisations, but also then thinking, how do we go from emergency response to what are the sustainable solutions to data poverty? And that's why we're really pleased. We've kind of had been given some funding to be able to take forward an idea called a data poverty lab. It's an idea we put in, we did a report to government last September. We hoped it was an idea that they might pick up and they might go, yes, we understand that data poverty is something we need to crack, and let's set up a data poverty commission or a data poverty lab. So they didn't pick up on that idea, but thankfully Nominet did pick up on that idea. And so we've got some funding, and really at its heart, it's about going, we know we need to find sustainable solutions. There's been amazing work happening, like Darren, you were talking about what Hartlepool Action Lab has been doing. We also know that the solutions and the responsibility needs to come from different places. So like, just recently O2 has said that they've been doing what's called zero rating of certain websites. So like if you want to get onto Citizens Advice or, access mental health support, they've made it possible for any of their customers to access those without paying data. So that's called zero rating of websites. So that's another sort of solution that isn't going to be the solution for everyone, but part of the idea of the Data Poverty Lab is thinking, well, how can we build on what Local Trust finds out through its research about community responses? What does that tell us that could be scaled or spread? What are the other solutions, and what is it that business and government can do? And this brings me back to kind of what is the role of people with lived experience as part of that. And we're really pleased that Apple Collective has agreed to kind of help us think through those things, because building what Abby and Ellie have been talking about, there's such an important role in people who have power, hearing the voices and the experiences and understanding what the issues are. But the other thing we're really aware of is there's a risk that all the solutions, or, here's a policy idea, here's a national solution, what have you, this is something business can do, that they get designed without being tested by and involving people who have that lived experience. And we've seen that happen in so many areas of kind of poverty solutions, actually, where things that have been well-intentioned then don't get taken up. So, for example, a really important area for us to learn from is we talk about internet being essential like electricity. We know that in areas like electricity, there have been things called social tariffs, which is around how do you enable people who are on lower incomes to be able to pay less. But we also know there can be loads of problems in people not knowing about, finding out about, taking those up. And also things about the sort of situation you need to be in even to access a social tariff. So, and also that question about what is affordable, is £20 a month affordable? And it was really interesting hearing, Darren, what you were saying, because it's not only about it's affordable. If you involve people with lived experience about what they're looking for and what helps them, it might not only be the price tag, it might be the fact that you can dip in and out of a solution, that you don't have to sign up to a contract or a contract over a very long period of time. What are the other things that actually will increase the chance that the solutions will really make a difference to the lives of people who live that every day? And I think that's where we'd like the Data Poverty Lab to really work with and benefit and collaborate with people who have lived experience.
Thanks, Emma. Hopefully, for just as a little plug for Apple, if so Abby, Ellie, and Emma's stories, they haven't let you know that, you know, being part of Apple isn't just around, you know, giving your lived experiences to the group. It gives us access to such a wider network of support for you know, in such a bigger platform. So early on just from Hartlepool Action Lab, when we started to look at our local response to the issue of the digital divide in Hartlepool, our links through the Apple Collective and through being members of the collective led us to Emma and the Good Things Foundation, and that, you know, answered so many questions that we had and give us so many solutions just through our links with Apple. And, you know, we cut the corner on potentially weeks and months of work of trying to make those connections ourselves by being able to be members of Apple. So yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. We're just going to take some questions now, which have just been coming through. So the first one that came through is to Abby, and I suppose Ellie, you could answer this as well. It's, how does the APPG feed back to communities and evidence the impact of their voices within the APPG?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's about accountability again. I don't know if there's like a set like system with the APPG on universal credit, because for the past year it has been like individuals. Obviously you represent Apple, but still like individuals coming to the evidence sessions to give. And also it's hard, sometimes the impact is hard to measure. Like I tried to come up with some of the impact today around like how the Lords fed back and Debbie Abrams went and gave on, but I think it's something that I guess it has to work like, so Tom Cave, my colleague, needs to be responsible for, even if 4 months down the line, he then can see the impact, because he then can see that the Lords have gone and had a conversation, or that he sees something quoted in the media, then always going back to the people that came to the session and gave it back. We have like a system internally in our co-production work of like, you said, we did, and it literally is just like a table that is quite easy to follow. So it's like, you said this, we did, and sometimes we send that 8 months on, because it might take that amount of time to really understand how that insight was or wasn't used. But it's so important that we go back and give that, because yeah, otherwise it can feel like, oh well, I don't know how that went, I don't know whether there was an impact from that. So yeah, it's really important to do that. You said, we did. Yeah, that would be good. I don't know whether you want to add anything into that, Ellie, with the left behind it.
So the APPG is relatively new, but we do try and have kind of like a circular feedback mechanism with the communities that feed into it, constantly touching base with them and seeing how issues are evolving, and kind of having a two-way kind of communication thing. Also, we have like a policy and advocacy group, so any of the members of our communities who are directly interested in kind of being a bigger part of the policy and influencing kind of role of local trust can kind of feed in directly and work with the policy team to kind of amplify their issues. But I think it's constantly evolving, and definitely being online has made it kind of a bit harder to kind of make it as effective as we'd probably like it to be.
Yeah, there's always been, you know, streaks of irony in everything that we've been doing through lockdown, in that we're trying to address the digital divide by being digital formats. But it's long, you know, we're making the best of a bad situation, I suppose. But yeah, that feedback is really, really important, and that's how we show value for what it is with the lived experience voice. You know, it's sometimes very, very difficult and very personal for a person to be able to speak about their experiences of poverty. and making sure that that person is not only listened to but heard, and that lived experience is as valuable as learned experience. Is something that we at Apple really advocate for, and we've been really thankful that every time we've had a chance to speak at the APPGs and other webinars, that's we've been listened to and heard is something that we've experienced. Next question that's come through is we've got Jordan from Harrow Mencap, who's saying, we're doing a roundtable with the APPG on the 8th of June, and we'll be getting self-advocates to speak about their lives experience. Do you have any advice for the advocates?
Hi Jordan, is that for the APPG on Universal Credit or a different one?
Different one actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing some for the APG for disability. And I just wondered, like, just general advice about the process and just making sure the self-advocates can express, people can express themselves as best they can there, and how it can be as powerful as possible. Because obviously it's a very limited time. I mean, it's only going to be an hour and a half, so I need to make the most out of the discussion that takes place.
Definitely. Well, firstly, if you want to get me offline, I could introduce you to my colleague Tom Cave, who is the Secretariat for our APPG, and he can probably give you a much more detailed response as someone that facilitates those conversations. But just now, from what I know, I think it's because there has to be a certain amount of political pragmatism to it, which sometimes can feel icky because it's someone's lived experience and you're asking someone to expose themselves in a way in order to essentially please or land for their trauma to land with an MP. So acknowledge the kind of ickiness of that, I would say, and make sure that the self-advocates that are coming to that meeting have the power to own that and feel powerful in that space. Because I feel, I have lived experience of financial hardship myself. That's why I was attracted to go and work for a poverty charity. And I know how different the lived experience hat feels to the professional hat. And you are so much more exposed. It can be empowering to tell your story, but it also can not be. So my advice would be make sure that you have the right self-advocates that get what they need to do and get what's wanted out of them and can tolerate the ickiness of it, and hopefully not just tolerate it, own it, so that they feel powerful in that space. Because the reality is the people in that, the MPs that are attending that meeting, they do want to hear your lived experience. They want to hear your story. And that has to be the right person. Or you kind of have a mix where you have some people that want to do that. And then you also have some people that, we have some people that we co-produce with that never refer to their own story. We just know, we know that just through them having lived experience qualifies them to comment on what our benefits calculator should look like and all the internal things. So it's whether there's, and this is what I was kind of nodding to in my talk as well, that I would like to see the culture of these APPGs and policy change so that you shouldn't have to trade your story as currency to be heard. It should be like Apple. It's okay, we say we have lived experience. We don't need to go into the individual stories of us. You should respect that enough that gets us a seat at the table. So but we might not be there yet with the APPGs. So there's a few things.
Thanks, Abby. Thank you. Yeah,
so just Abby, I thought that was brilliant. That was so helpful. Actually, I learned lots of tips there as well. But some of the things that we found helpful is, and you're probably thinking this already, Jordan, but it's kind of getting people together beforehand. So maybe a week beforehand and kind of just doing a run through and helping people think about the sort of things they want to say. And then also opening up the space a bit beforehand so that, people are able just to kind of chat. We've also sometimes supported people in that kind of conversational bit, so it's not all one. You've got someone who, a bit like Darren, is sort of, you know, supporting the conversation to happen, and can then it can help if a self-advocate is anxious about, they want to say certain things. Well, these are the things, can you give me a prompt if I don't remember to say this, because actually I really want to get this point across, if you see what I mean. So then you as a facilitator can help to just be there for that person as well. And I think the only other thing, anyone going to an APPG, so as a group, it's sort of, if they ask you, and even if they don't, what is the one thing you want them to take away, having heard? So as Abby says, it's not only taking away the kind of stories in a nicky way, it's what's the one message, or what's the one thing that you want to kind of have that, you know, to see changed as well.
No, thank you for that. That's really good.
Thank you. Thanks for your question, Jordan. The next one's to all the panelists, and it's, how can university-based researchers be useful in this space? So Annie Irvines sent us a message, obviously, the more events I join with grassroots and campaign organisations, the more useless I feel we are. Not at all, Annie, but Abby's talked about recognising each other's expertise. What can academic research bring to the table, and how would you like us to do this? Who wants to lead off on that one? Do you want to go, Emma? Pick up where you left off.
Yes. So I think it's one of the things that I think is really interesting for, I suppose, a challenge for academic researchers generally is also, how do you make sure you make use of all of the information that's out there from communities themselves, like Apple Collective as well, and OperationWifi and us and others. It's not just going to the academic resources, because academics really haven't done much around digital exclusion and inclusion and the divide. And there are some who are brilliant, but if a starting point for any project is, let's look at what the academics have done on this, then you're not going to get very far. You're not going to get as far as you will with, like, the work that, for example, I cannot wait until the research that Rosa and Local Trust and Ellie are doing comes out, because I just think that is going to be so massively helpful. It's also an area where there is a lot of stuff we do know, but actually there are massive gaps as well. One of the things, and I think some of it is really interesting in terms of some of the gaps around solutions, are also, how do we work out what is, like that question about what is affordable, or what do households need, and what are those complex barriers, because there are, you know, high level associations that people have with, like, it's only older people or what have you, and actually there's a lot of stuff we do know, but still, you know, it's kind of what works for people then, and what are the different issues. But I think, in a way, Annie, you're already kind of coming from that perspective of, I've got skills and I've got things that I know I can use. How can I use them? And I'm pretty sure every single one of us on this will have a list of kind of research questions. But I'd read what comes out of Ellie's and think, okay, well, how can you then build on that through your research?
Thanks, Emma. Ellie, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So we have a lot of research that goes on as part of kind of the influencing role of Local Trust, both for, like, internal use to try and make sure our support for our communities is as good as it could be, but also for kind of external influencing. And a big part of that is ensuring that a lot of our communities, a lot of our groups are kind of run on volunteers with a lack of kind of capacity, a lack of time, and also have quite a lot of experience of kind of researching kind of researchers, and also kind of NGOs, like dropping in, asking some questions, doing some stuff, and then just disappearing. So a big part of, like, how we support our researchers to kind of like best practice, I guess, is kind of give them what we call a deep dive on the big local programme, the importance of stuff being resident led, of being kind of like light touch and mutually beneficial, and making sure any kind of research outputs, as well as having kind of a formalised report and stuff, also kind of have some tangible beneficial resources, conversations, workshops that then can actually feed back into the community and support them in the issues that maybe the researchers were initially researching. So it's trying to find the kind of, like, two-way mutually beneficial process and emphasizing as much what can communities and individuals get out of it, as much as kind of like the research outcome as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ellie. Abby?
Yeah, it really, I think, you know, academics have resource, you have skill sets to understand things in a really deep way. And so I guess how we look at it in turn to us is there's like three types of insight that should lead all our decisions: lived expertise, professional expertise, and data. So I guess academics would like straddle the professional expertise and data to drive decisions. So an example of how this has worked at Turn to Us, we're currently in a collaboration with the Bennett Institute for Public Policy, which is at Cambridge, and I think the comments said you're at Cambridge as well. And we've been working with 2 academics, a few staff members, and then 4 people with lived experience, and we've formed a working group, and we've been working together since December to understand what the word thriving means, because we have it in our strategic purpose, but we could definitely benefit from a deeper understanding of it. So yeah, like what it means to thrive. And so the way we've done it is that everyone has been like a participatory researcher. So everyone has interviewed one another in like like if you think of it, it's like a triangle of the different types of expertise, and everyone's like interviewed one another. And then the academics have like formulated the paper. So that is kind of where the academics like fill the right space at the, and then we'll come back together, we'll test the model of thriving with even more co-production partners. And then we'll also bring it out to like our wider network at Turn to Us and at the start, we did a survey with like 1,500 people with lived experience. So we've like staggered it. But there's still been that core team, which is 4 people with lived experience that have, you know, attended the meetings, had a say on the questions, actually done part of the research as well. So yeah, that is coming to an end like June, July time. But so maybe if you look at our website around that time, we'll have like a report of the full methodology of what it was like. But that is one example of how like academics, charities and people with experience can collaborate.
Brilliant, thanks, Abby. And it sounds very much as if that needs to be an ongoing conversation, you know, as and when whatever pops up. So
yeah, thank you very much for all the replies. That's really helpful. Thank you.
No worries, Annie. And like I say, if you want to get Katie's emails there as the Apple contact, so if you want to pick up that conversation with us as and when, you know, opportunities arise, then we're quite happy to continue that conversation. Thank you. Just to quickly highlight before we move on to the next question, we as Apple, you know, we work to amplify the voice of lived experience, but we also want to amplify the voices of other organisations that are working in this field, so that we can share our platform and, you know, and all grow together. So in June we have Apple Month, which is where we have all, you know, loads of events and try to, you know, generate a lot of energy within a short period of time. We all get together, all the member organisations hopefully going to get together. We couldn't do it last year. We all get together, you know, for a bun fight and talk through what we're going to be doing for the next sort of 12 months and stuff like that. So if anyone, Coy's put the link in the chat there for our website. So if anyone is doing anything or wants us to highlight anything that's happening in June for Apple Month, then please just follow that link and fill in the form on the website, and we'll be happy to sort of highlight anything that's going on. And alternatively, if you have platforms yourself to highlight what we're doing, that would be greatly appreciated. Next question, I think this is a really interesting one actually, from Rachel Gregory. It says, what do you think is the most powerful narrative to take with policymakers and telecommunication companies? So there's lots of parallels between connectivity and essential services like water and energy, but with even with the very physical health risks for these, there are fuel poverty initiatives, but not universal affordable provision is there. Is there a risk that connectivity joins the back of the essential services queue if it's the narrative we take? And I know if we get a chance to, and if it doesn't get discussed, I'd pass that over to Astrid as well if she has a chance to answer that. But yeah, panelists, anyone who needs to jump in and answer that one? Emma, you're nodding.
I think it's a really, really, really great question, actually. And I'm also not sure, I'm not entirely sure that the best narrative with policymakers is necessarily the best narrative with telecommunications providers as well. I think with the essential services one, that's definitely a line that we've taken. One of the things, though, that I'm really, I think you're right, that there is a risk, Rachel, that it kind of then gets added on to the end. But also, as I say, a bit like with social tariffs, where you then get to as a solution actually isn't a solution that cracks the issue for enough people or the people who most need it. So I think that's also something to watch out for. And so I think that's where, with things like the Data Poverty Lab, part of it, you know, our learning also has to be not only from people with lived experience, a bit like Abby, I really liked what you're saying about lived experience, but also professional expertise. So if, for example, you are, you know, it is your business, you are a telecommunication provider, clearly you're a for-profit organisation. So what is your perspective on the pros and the cons of the essential services argument? What does that mean? What does that mean for you? What are the things that you can do that you can't do? You know, is O2 doing 0 rating for some websites because, you know, because actually that would be really easy for them to expand to do? Or, you know, so I really want to find out from some of the telecoms providers what might fit with their business models, or that would also really work better for people who struggle to pay for data. I think the other thing that's been going through my head, and I know this is ironic because obviously Good Things Foundation, we are talking about a data poverty lab. I think the definition that Nesta have used around really focusing on data poverty is really, really helpful. And I think that's going to come up through the local trust stuff as well. But one of the other risks is actually fundamentally, there's a big part of this that is just about poverty. And it's a bit like the pros and the cons of like campaigning around period poverty. So that was really, really important in terms of raising awareness of an issue, which has got a very specific gender dimension. And also there are other kind of taboos around it and kind of leads to certain solutions. But do we then take our eye off the bigger problems around the gendered nature of poverty? So I think that's the other thing that that it just keeps going around my head as well, is it works as a space to try and get people who have an interest in that specific issue together. It doesn't necessarily mean that when we're then trying to move to advocate for this, that it doesn't necessarily make it the most powerful or helpful language to use with people we're trying to influence, if that makes sense. So I don't have an answer, but I'm just so glad you asked the question, because I think it's something we all need just to keep thinking about, because otherwise we'll all be in our bubble of using language that makes sense to us, but doesn't actually get change happening.
Thanks, Emma. I think we are running out of time. We're going to pass over to so sorry, Abby, Ellie, and thank you, Abby, Ellie, Emma, for being panelists. That was absolutely fantastic information. Thanks for all the questions. Like I say, anyone who has asked a question, we will be posing it to the panel for answers. And if there's anything else that anybody wants to add, feel free to email or pass it on through chat, and we'll make sure that the conversation, continues after the webinar's finished. So I'll now pass over to Tracy to wrap it all up.
I'll do my best at wrapping it all up. How do you follow such fab speakers and sessions and everything else that's gone on today? I have got a couple of notes here, so do forgive me if I come down, because I've tried to capture some key points. So I want to thank everybody for their attendance and participation today. And my sincere thanks do go to everyone who's pulled this together. It wasn't an easy task, particularly for us who are not that confident on Zoom and everything else. But everyone's made it such a welcome and interactive session. I want to thank all of the speakers. I want to thank all of the facilitators, all of the participants who've kept the conversation going, and Katie, who's been there in the background, checking that we've got into our Zoom sessions, our breakout rooms or whatever. So it was a challenge, but it was a really good challenge and a really interesting debate. I hope everyone's enjoyed the session, and I hope everyone's able to take something from it. As talked about at the start of the session, the Apple Collective aims to put the voice of lived experience at the heart of policy making or decision making. Evidence and good practice will show that without this insight and expertise, then solutions that are desired and impact that's desired and outcomes may not be achieved. So the intentions may be honourable, but the actual impact and effect in the communities that's suffering may not be what's wanted. So it's only by merging areas of expertise that we can find effective solutions, and solutions that may have make a real difference in our communities. So it's great to see today on this webinar we've got knowledge, insight and expertise from all walks of life, and I think together that's when you can have an honest conversation and really think down and deeply about, well, what might work and what might make a difference, and together I'm sure we can come up with a solution. The digital divide has always been there, it's always been an issue. The pandemic has really amplified this, whether not being able to stay connected to someone, whether not being able to access any service or log on to a universal credit account, do online shopping, WhatsApp or Zoom or Snapchat I've learned, you know what I mean? These things are part of everyday modern life, but the pandemic's amplified it. It's amplified our disconnected ability. I don't think that sounded grammatically correct, but it's amplified our disconnection. So there is a real barrier out there, and things need to change. I mentioned earlier on in our feedback, for us just as an organisation as well, we found it really difficult to stay connected to some of our the people in the past who have accessed our service. So we talked about connectivity not being a luxury, but actually a necessity in modern day society. So we had a number of great breakout sessions that looked at the disconnected society. We looked at OperationWifi, talked about where their journey started, the setting up of a national databank, and that was only one part of addressing the digital divide. There was some fab researches being done now by the Frame Collective. Hartlepool Action Lab talked about a lot of the things that they're doing in their community. And a fact sheet will be drawn together from the information that's been presented and collated and the discussion points today. And that's our first action following from this meeting today, or from this webinar today. So we will pull together a fact sheet talking about the things that have been discussed in the breakout sessions, and that will be available for people, everyone who's attended today, and then it will be put up on our website as well. We had a great panel discussion, as we've just heard there. I think Darren introduced that quite well. It's all right us speaking out and using our voice, but if we're speaking into a void, then we're not going to get very far, are we? So we need allies, and we not just need them, we welcome allies and support from others. And Abby, Ellie and Emma, fantastic responses to some great questions there. And I think it's promoted some real good thought, of how we can take some of the next steps. I think throughout the session today, we've talked about Apple being a growing membership, and we're keen to attract and grow our membership from organisations or individuals who have lived experience of poverty or socioeconomic disadvantage, and information about that's on our website. Again, I'm conscious it's on the website. So we're relying on our networks to get the word out, and also then signpost them to us or pick up the phone. I'm sure each organisation has a phone number, each Apple member organisation has a phone number, so there's a way of getting in touch. So, I mean, there are opportunities to become a part of Apple as well. We've talked quite clearly about the amplification of voice throughout this session, and it's about being part of a united community. It's having solidarity, it's having a mandate to take things forward. It's about a growing network then who then aligns themselves with other stakeholders to make a difference. So there are opportunities there, and we would recommend that. And I think Darren did mention just earlier on there, Apple, June is going to be Apple month. So there was a link in the chat there to say, we're about amplifying voice. So we encourage and urge other people to get in touch in whatever way works for them. And then Apple will take on that responsibility, ensure that their voice is amplified. And we're looking forward to that. We also have a book coming out in June throughout Apple Month as well. So I would look out for that on our website again. I'm sick of saying website and Twitter feed when we're talking about digital divide. It just doesn't make sense, does it? So I think, you know, what we're taking for granted here today and having our message, you know, rippling out to the wider community is we all need to take some responsibility of how we're going to do that and how then we're going to feed in voices of people who are not connected to the wider debate. So I'm hoping you've all got something from it. I do really thank you all for attending and sticking out today, and hope to see you again in the future.